Welcome, neighbors. So I'm Christina Davis, and when they started a year plus ago the neighborhood district program, I was asked to be the neighborhood representative for the Provost South Neighborhood. So I am anxious to get to meet and know each of you better, and I really appreciate you bringing your ideas tonight. And our hope, in conjunction with Malia Dally of the city staff and Rachel Green, that we will have an evening of collaboration where you can share your ideas, your frustrations, and potential solutions, and we can come up with a future that is safer than how things are today. So, with that, I'm going to just encourage you that if you would like more information and to be part of the neighborhood email or Facebook page to sign up on the register on the back table, I would remind you that in 2 weeks is our Slate Canyon Saturday, where the neighborhood comes together to help protect Slate Canyon and the foothills. And this year, the focus is connecting art and nature. We care about things that we see as beautiful or important. So we have some artists coming to help with art projects for all ages. Um, Malia is going to give an introductory statement, and then we'll open the time for collaboration and discussion. And the goal was to make this so informal that you would feel comfortable sharing your ideas without fear of reprisal and neighborhood harsh feelings, but that everyone would leave feeling that their ideas had been heard and that the solutions going forward would benefit the greatest number of people. Thanks.
Awesome, thank you. Um, my name is Malia, and I am a policy analyst in the council office. So I was assigned this task to kind of research this and give the council kind of some ideas and also get neighborhood feedback. So that's why I'm here. But yeah, I just want to kind of just go over some basics of what the council is looking at and how this got to this point. And then we're just going to open it up to you all. I will say this is being recorded just so the council can go back and listen to it and just hear what everyone is saying. Also, all of this information that you see here on the screen is on Open City Hall, which is just this application that Provo City Council has. So if you Google Provo City Open City Hall, then you can go there. There's actually a lot of topics where you can comment on things that the city council is looking at, including like zone changes or developments, but this is one of those items there. And you can make comments there, and we send those comments, and the council logs on and looks at those comments frequently. I had counselors today tell me they already read all the comments that are on Open City Hall, so they're frequently checking that. So if you don't get a chance to speak tonight, or you feel like you didn't say everything you wanted to say, or you think of something later, feel free to get on there. You can also always email the council at council@provo.org, and that goes to all 7 counselors at once. So that's a great email address to also utilize. Okay, so I'm just going to go over a summary of the issue. If you have clarifying questions, please just raise your hand and I can try and answer those for you. Same goes when everyone's discussing. If you have questions, I don't have all the answers. I'm not parking enforcement. I'm not a traffic engineer. So I just have the information that those people gave me. So I won't be able to answer everything, but we are taking down any questions that people do have that we don't have the answer to, and we'll find that information, and then we'll send it out to the neighborhood leaders, so like Christina and those others in the neighborhoods in the district program, and get those dispersed. So we will try and answer everything that we can. So just a summary of the issue. I'm just going to kind of look at this. So the goals, the council asked me to look at kind of the goals to address parking congestion and then safety along Slate Canyon. This came from themselves. They just noticed it being members of the community, but then also hearing it from community members as well. And so the three goals there are to reduce parking congestion, improve overall road safety, and then mitigate over occupancy in rental units. They haven't decided on a way to do that. Those are just kind of their goals for the area. And then we're trying to figure out how to achieve those goals and what the best policy would be to achieve those goals. So what they've looked at so far and those things that legislatively the council can do. One is a permit parking program. This is something that's implemented in other areas of the city and other neighborhoods. They have parking permit programs where residences are allowed to permits to park on the road overnight. In our code currently, it is 2 permits per household, but we could change that to 1, or the council can change it to what they would like to. And then overnight parking ban. This is something else that they've talked about, which is just banning overnight parking on the street. Hours not determined, but that's just an idea that they have. As you all know, in the Alpine Loop HOA, it's already banned by the city overnight parking up there in that development, in that HOA. So one of the considerations is doing that on parts of Slate Canyon Drive or all of it. Then if you go online, the more information, those are just some research that I found from parking enforcement from a traffic engineer. It gives you some speed data, it gives you traffic data, parking data. I can tell you right now, also our parking team is doing a parking study where they're doing parking counts to see how utilized on-street parking is and trying to look at that so that way the council has all the information before they make a decision. That information also has some data from code enforcement regarding rental units and over occupancy of rental units, looking into those things. And yeah, so there's some good data there if you want to look at that. And then I also just put up the current regulations that are required in the code, which is just that dwellings, okay, I don't want to say the word dwelling, that's weird, but houses, residences can have a certain number of spaces, and it kind of depends on the number of like what the residence is like. But anyway, so with all that said, that's kind of just baseline where we're at. And now I'm going to turn it over, Christina or I or anyone. We kind of just really want this to be informal. If people want to bring up things, again, this is being recorded so the council can listen to stuff, but we're just going to kind of open it up and have people discuss. And like I said, please ask questions. I might not be able to answer them, but we will find out the information and get it back to you. So yes, so just raise your hand.
So I just wanted to ask, what exactly does over occupancy count for? Does that, like, what is that based off of?
When people comment, please let us know if you live on Slate Canyon or if you don't live on Slate Canyon. I think that's super important to be aware of, that people who live on Slate Canyon should be given greater weight.
Okay, so over occupancy, I guess I'll just stand right here. It's kind of awkward. Over occupancy is really based on the type of dwelling that is. So if it's a rental, you can have, in our code, I can send you the code reference. We can send that out. It is a little complicated, but I'll try and explain it the best I can here. For rentals, you can have 3 unrelated adults. So up to 3 people per rental unit. So if it's a whole house, so for example, I live up on Alpine Loop in that HOA in a townhome, so it's me and 2 other roommates. So there's 3 of us living there. So that's allowed in a rental unit. If it's a family, you can have as many people as you want. It's a family. Also, if it's a family and you're renting out, you can rent out 1 room up to just for 1 person. You can do that as well. But it's just 3 people per rental unit.
I ask more of that question based off of, like, does that equal any term of like if there's a certain amount of adults in a family or roommates, is there a certain amount of vehicles permitted?
Yeah, so for a rental unit, you have to have 4 off-street parking spaces. And so a rental unit by code would need to have that. I think someone else had their hand raised before you, Hannah, but oh, hold on.
A rental space has to have 4 off-street parking spaces, but there are certain areas like the condos up above Slate Canyon Drive and in areas of my neighborhood, don't live on Slate Canyon Drive, they're only allowed 2 vehicles per unit. So even if you have 3 people living in a house, the legal rental only allows 2 cars. On Slate Canyon Drive, I think all of those houses are allowed 4 cars and 3 adults. All the condos up above only allow 3 adults and no more than 2 cars, except for in the Alpine area that she's talking about, because the driveways are a little bit longer and they've utilized the parking space. But it's also the case in my neighborhood where we have single family homes, but they just have 1 driveway. It's only a 2-car limit. And also in all of the condo areas in Deer Haven and Pioneer. So that's the legal limit. And when you, as a landlord, you have to disclose to your tenant that they can only have 3 people and they can only bring in 2 vehicles if you're in that condo area, or you can only bring in 4 cars. So I think I only say that because when you were talking about over occupancy, I think it's important to talk about people and the number of vehicles, because it's both.
I'm going to cut to this one real quick.
Oh, it's okay.
Oh, okay.
Clarify. It's
I missed that first part. If you're on one of the houses on Slate Canyon and you have your family living there, is a restriction as to how many.
Thing. The size of those driveways are double driveways on Slate Canyon Drive. And right, they allow tandem parking. So legally, you can own 4 vehicles if you live or rent on Slate Canyon Drive. You can't have 5 because then you're breaking the code. If you live in the condo areas, you can only have 2. But yeah, the code at the top, and that applies for everybody.
So what we're missing here is, even if you have 4 off-street parking spaces, the real bottom line is, if you read up on the board, it says current regulations. And Provo Code 1437060 requires 1 and 2 family residential dwellings to maintain the greater of 3 spaces per unit, or 1 space per vehicle owned and operated by the residents at that property. So you can have 20 people. If you have 1 car, great. If you have 3 cars and you got a place to park them off street, great. But if you have 20 cars, you got a problem, because you got to match up the number of cars you own with the number of off-street parking spaces by the code.
You could have your driveway open, your garage open, and no cars parked in it. And then you could have 4 or 6, or in my case, the neighbors have 8 that they will park in the street. So even though you have 4 available, doesn't necessarily mean that you're taking advantage of those and you're using street parking instead.
Great question.
Well, I'm just have a question. Who on the street to make that decision? Because those houses is being made it for a big family. So imagine here in Utah, every family have at least 4 or 5 kids. And if those kids start growing up, each one is gonna have a car. Where are you gonna let your kid park in?
This is Christina Davis again. I've been asked to take minutes to give to the city council. So I don't know everybody's name. Will you please state your name clearly before you make your comment? Because I'm guessing, but I'm not guessing well enough. So
My name is Jennifer Torres, and I live in Slate Canyon. And I would like to have the answer because where I coming from in Florida, family only have 2, 3 kids. Here they have 5 and 6. And then how are you gonna let your kids park in when they grow up and they have a car at 16 or 18? And in a family, it can be my husband, me, 3 kids, and maybe my mom, and if I bring it back to live with me because she's too old and she can live by herself. And then how many cars I'm gonna park in if I only have 2 in the garage, 2 on the driveway, and then I can use my 2, one in the front of my house.
For who owns the, well, I don't know an answer to that, but the city owns the street. That's, yeah.
You have 4 cars, so if you have 8 people who each have a car. I'm sorry, that's why this code has been misunderstood. So this is why there's feelings that are difficult, but we need to make this point clear. If you own a home, you're fortunate. Your parking availability is in your garage and in your driveway, and you have no legal right to park on the street. We all do park on the street, and that's a lovely advantage we have here, unlike Baltimore or Washington, D.C. But the city of Provo owns the street, and they're responsible for the safety of people coming out of their driveways. And tonight's goal is to find a solution, because having, like I have 6 children, so I absolutely know this stress. I can only park 2 cars in my garage because my driveway is so steep. No vehicle can stay parked on my driveway. So I legally can have 2 vehicles. At one time, I had 3 vehicles, and I was making problems for my neighbors because the car was parking on the curb. So I myself have lived with this challenge, and I understand what you're saying. And what we're explaining tonight is the law in Provo City is vehicles to park in the garage and the driveway. And the city of Provo is responsible for the safety, so you can get out of your garage and you can get out of your driveway. And that's why we need to come up with a plan tonight. And that's why you're hearing words like permit parking and no overnight parking on the street, because we have a safety problem.
Okay. Do you, yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if it's on, but okay. You mentioned that the parking people are doing a study right now on the numbers of cars parked on the street. Are they just doing that during the day or during the night? Because it's completely different at night than it is during the day.
Great question. When they do a parking study, they do all hours of the day. So they
Okay.
check at all times, especially like before people leave for work. So at like 3 a.m. when like most people are home and there's probably the most cars there. And then also like during the day when everyone's gone for work and people are in and out. So they do it 24 hours.
Okay.
Yeah, my name's Dana Thompson. I'm on Slate Canyon, and I also own the house my mom lives in, which is also on Slate Canyon. So, I was reading through the proposal that from 2019 that you can find online from the city. Basically, it said that for every 18 feet of frontage, you could qualify for a permit. And most of the houses on Slate Canyon do not have 36 feet of frontage in front of them of available driveway, because we've got 50 feet wide lots. And then the 2 driveways are going to take up 16 feet, so that puts you at 34. So 2 feet less than you would need, plus the slope, you're down to 1. So one of my big questions would be, you know, for those that do have about 34 feet of frontage in front of their house, is it possible, you know, that we'd be able to add a driveway if we would need to be, to still be able to leave 1 parking spot in front of the house, which is about all you could legally fit unless it's a smart car. And then none of this addresses the fact that a lot of people are speeding through the neighborhood at like 50 miles an hour. And I got young kids, so concerned. The people speeding down the street at like 50 miles an hour. I got young kids, and that's a big concern. Happened once while I was pulling out, and I followed the person, got their license plate down by the 7-Eleven, and then later was able to easily find them up in the condos. So
I don't have an answer to if you could put another driveway in. I don't know, but I will. Yeah. Okay. Someone else had a question.
Hi, my name is Jeff Whitlock. I don't live on Slate Canyon, but I live on Oregon Avenue. So I'm in the neighborhood and drive on Slate Canyon quite a lot. So I've just a couple questions. Sorry, I showed up a little late with my kids, so I might have missed some of the context. Is there a specific section of that road we're talking about?
No.
Is
So
the
right
whole-
now, the council, we just all of Slate Canyon Drive. They're like, maybe we'll do part of it. Maybe we'll do all. Like the council right now is very undecided on what they're going to do, and they're just trying to get ideas and feedback on any possible solution, which is why we're doing this. We're trying. Yeah. So there's no set place yet.
Okay. Okay. Because the reason why I ask is because obviously the problems are concentrated within a section of it. As you go down the hill towards Slate Canyon Park and stuff, it's much less of an issue. And as you come down towards the church and the boys, the juvenile detention center, much less of an issue. Another question I have, and then I have a comment. What's the impetus of this? Is it primarily safety? People backing out of driveways? Is that the?
Yeah. So I mean, it was really like when I was speaking with the council, it was really the 3 bullet points at the top there. Those are the things they tasked me to try and find ideas for. So trying to come up with a solution that addresses all 3 of those things, which is just parking, congestion, safety, and over occupancy in rental units.
Okay. Yeah. The reason why I was curious about that is because the only legislative options up there are parking related, whereas there's other problems that were pointed to. And so I'm wondering, are we trying to regulate parking, or are we trying to use parking as a way to regulate over occupancy, or both?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay. And then just my last comment is I want to dovetail what the gentleman over here said is I feel like, parking can be a contributor to safety, but the primary safety problem in that street is speeding. It's like hands down speeding. People rip through that neighborhood so fast. And there's not, it's actually, I was commenting to Rachel, my wife, about this the other days. We were driving and someone people will like ride your butt if you go 20 miles an hour on that street because they're just used to speeding on it so much. And I was saying the road is designed like a regular thoroughfare, like it should have 40 miles an hour. It's very, very wide. There's very little traffic calming measures. And so I would just like that to me seems like the biggest leverage point to kind of solve some of these problems.
Yes. So I will take that. That's another thing I've brought up to the council before, but like this feedback about speeding, that is very helpful, and we can continue to bring that to the council. And we have a question over here.
My name is Katie Holmes. I am curious, as we talk about Slate Canyon, I don't live on Slate Canyon, but I see tons of parking problems in my neighborhood just below Slate Canyon. So I'm wondering if the city can do the parking assessment on Slate Canyon. Are they willing to, at the same time, study more of the neighborhood rather than just one street?
That's something we can bring up. Yeah. Right now that's not in the scope, but this feedback is great.
My name is Shannon Keinert. I live on Slate Canyon Drive as well. When we talk about the safety, what is the main safety concern with parking? And is it mostly the visibility when you're backing out of your driveway? And if so, I don't see how that accounts for the randomness of when you're backing out. At any given time, somebody can be parked there, even if most of the street is empty. So I don't understand how that necessarily ensures safety, and if that is indeed the only thing we're talking about with safety with the parking.
I don't know if that's the only thing. That's the thing that was specifically brought up to me, along with speeding. So speeding and then sight lines when people are backing out of their driveways. And then parking was an issue to that. So
beyond the line of sight, if somebody's parked there, that's the only safety issue.
And speeding.
Right. Besides the speeding, but
yeah.
But as far as what parking can do for it.
Yes.
As have multiple people mentioned, speeding is by far the biggest problem on Slate Canyon. And like Jeff said, it's built like a big thoroughfare. And if we get all of the cars off of the street, it's going to look like a 4-lane highway, and people are going to go exponentially faster than they already are. So speeding is much more, in my opinion, much more of an issue than parking. And also pointing out, yeah, technically we have 2-car garages. My garage is a 1.5 car garage. At one point I had nothing in my garage but my city issued garbage can and two subcompact cars, and we could not open our doors. So in theory, yeah, in practicality, no.
My name's Kimberly Morris, and I agree with Lisa that if we take all the cars off the road, it'll increase this speeding. But to answer this gentleman's question, like in terms of the visibility backing out, where I am located on Slate Canyon, there are so many homes near me that have 7 to 9 cars that are parking 2 in front of each house, that if I only had 1 car in front of every house, I wouldn't have a problem with visibility backing out. But when they line up 2 in front of a house and sometimes even blocking their driveways, I literally can't see anyone coming either direction. And so whenever I back out, I just think, well, I hope they see me and they slow down because I'm not going to see them until I'm like halfway into the road. So anyway.
We'll get to you guys. We got a question back there. Hannah, I think, had one.
Just to add a little bit to what this gentleman said when he was talking about speeding and parking. My name is Hannah Peterson. I do not live on Slate Canyon Drive. A little bit of background, though. I am a landlord in Southeast Provo. And I keep they're talking about over occupancy. This is a big issue too that you need to consider when you're talking about this, is because the city has to be fair to everybody. They cannot favor one landlord over another. They cannot favor one group of citizens over another. And I have been denied off-street parking when I have been in single family homes in the area, in Aspen Summit, Deer Haven, and Pioneer, because all of them only have a 2-car limit. That is a significant amount of revenue for me as a landlord. And so when you look at the scope of how many landlords in those condo areas up above you are in violation of that 2-car limit, okay, or how many landlords are in violation of the 4-car limit on Slate Canyon Drive, how many people with basement apartments are in violation of the 4-car limit, and families who are in violation of 4-car limit. It is a double standard. They are enforcing those laws in other neighborhoods and just south of us. And so you're gonna run up, the city council has got to look at that and say, why is this street or why are those condos gonna get away with that behavior when other landlords are not given that chance? Because it affects owner occupancy, it affects housing values when you give landlords that opportunity to use the public street for our parking lot, okay? When I'm denied that, I cannot rent to a house full of students. I can only rent probably to a family, and my rent is going to go significantly lower. So it's an issue when you're talking about just this, understand that behind you and up above you, you're going to have a battle from investor to investor, and we're going to bring it up with the city. We want the same rights as everybody else. And so I think you have to understand that the city is also looking at it. How are they going to do this? Are they going to enforce zoning on everybody on Slate Canyon Drive? Are they going to introduce zoning enforcement on everybody in those condos? Or is it going to be more peaceful and merciful and cost effective to put in parking regulation? I'm just throwing that out as maybe that if you're, because you live on Slate Canyon Drive, you might not be aware of another battle that's going on right above you or around you.
We have questions up here, Rachel.
The cars drive too fast for me to play. And also, if the road was shorter on Slate Canyon Drive, I think it would be safer because the cars would have to slow down to turn. But I mean, no, not shorter. I think that the biggest problem here is speed. Is really dangerous. There isn't a lot of kids on my street, but still is really dangerous. There's cars going at around like 70 miles per hour. And here's a story my friend told me. So he was playing basketball in his front yard. The ball went onto the street and a car just hit it. No hesitation of stopping. And the ball flew all the way to the neighbor's backyard. Speed is something really dangerous in this neighborhood.
Okay, over here, we have a question.
Oh,
Yep.
My name's Juliana Flores. I live on Slate Canyon. Two things about speed. So I realized when you're going down the street and you hit the first speed marker, when it's like going downhill, everyone usually slows down, at least from my point of view. But after that, it's just super far and long street, and there's nothing else to control you. Like maybe they should put another speed marker. And that would definitely do something at least compared to having nothing. And second, on the slide or the document you're showing, it looks at having a permit parking program. And I don't see how that would help the backing out safely if everyone's going to have two cars anyway. But with the permit, what is that going to change safety wise? It's just going to let it be regulated, but it's still going to have the same effect, cars being all the way on the street.
I think Rachel, there's the gentleman back there too needs a mic.
Melanie McCord. I built the little Sweet Haven subdivision. That was my subdivision. Okay. So I got involved with all of this stuff back in 1997. I have been watching this since before all of the Steve Stewart developments were built up there. I remember when it was a dirt road. And I remember, and I sat in on all of the discussions about approving these PDs. They're called PDs, planned developments. And the contractor the developer who built all of these gave us the assurance that this was going to be affordable housing for families. Based on that, the LDS Church built the chapel down there. Based on that, the school district built the school up there because this was going to be single family housing, affordable housing for single families. And we said, well, how can we make sure of that? They said, well, we're going to put it, number one, we're going to put it in the homeowners association rules. Right? But the thing that's really going to control to make sure that these properties never get turned over to investors and sold as profit generating properties is the parking regulations. They can only have 2 cars per unit. And that means that these units are not going to be attractive to investors. They're not going to become student housing for what they call batching singles, meaning 3, 4, 5, 6. That was the intent. That was the intent. And that's what we were promised 30, 40, 50 years ago. And now to see all of these other symptoms that come along, the speed and the increased parking and the lack of safety, those are symptoms of the larger problem. And that is that these units are being misused from what they were promised they were going to be. And that's really hard for me because I've been fighting this battle for 30 years. In 2019, our neighborhood had all kinds of meetings about it. Hannah held 11 meetings. And the neighbors all got together and said, yes, this is what we went to. And then the staff came back and said, we recommend against your parking permit program. This was after they told us the only way to regulate this area was to put in a parking permit program. And then they went to council and recommended against it. Yeah, I'm a little pissed. I want to see two other things happen. I want to see the property managers and the homeowners associations prosecuted. That when you've got property management companies that are knowingly renting to more than 3 single adults, I want them to lose their business license in town. And I want Provo City Council to allocate money for that legal prosecution. And then I want to see this area become not attractive for out-of-town investors. I want this to go to Malia. Who owns your unit? Some guy in Springville. Okay. Dave, is there anything else I forgot? Okay, good. Dave is my editor. He goes to all the meetings with me and tells me when I'm too abrasive.
Here, Mel. We're gonna go back here first and then here to this gentleman.
Hi, my name is Mike Beaumont and I live on Slate Canyon Drive. So what you were saying is correct. They were originally built for single family homes, but there are several people, and I was one of the original purchasers of the home, and I still live there currently. We had 5 children, raised all of our kids in our house, and they all grow up. Well, then when they're growing up, they become adults, they have their own vehicles, and then they have to go to work and back. So it makes it hard for some families to be able to have enough parking. We do have 3 vehicles that we park in our garage. Well, the garage and the driveway, which is very steep, but we still make it happen. And I have 2 vehicles on the street that wouldn't fit in my garage anyways because they're too tall to fit in there. You know, and so, you know, by changing this, you're saying that people can't park on the street. At least that's what I heard from you, that people aren't supposed to, but then the city's also planning to allow you to buy a permit to park on the street. So what is the difference in the two? You know what I mean? It's like, why do they have to have a permit if they are willing to let people to park on the street, you know? Because if they do make the change where no one's allowed to park on the street, then basically I'm gonna feel like I'm gonna have to sell my house and move, which I don't want to do because I love my neighborhood, I love my neighbors, and I've been in our ward for so long that I don't want to leave, okay? But that's just my own personal feeling towards this. And I do realize there is a problem because there's, you know, and it's even worse the farther north you go. I live on the south side of Slate Canyon towards the south end, and the parking, although it is bad, it's not as bad as it is farther north. So I feel for my neighbors up there.
If the investors who have bought the units and are renting them out to more than 3, if they went away, don't you think that your neighborhood could absorb the 5 cars that you have in your family?
Well, I believe they could, yes.
I believe it too. I don't think that this is an issue of us trying, of me, in any case, wanting to hurt anybody's families. But I do want to provide a disincentive to the investors who look at this and they go, ching, you know, man, we can put a whole bunch of students in here and we don't care how, if we have the parking for it, and we don't care what kind of impact that has on the church congregations, on the schools, on the neighborhood. We don't care. It's just the money.
Yeah.
I think that if you had everybody up there being good neighbors, they could absorb you without even batting an eye.
Well, and I think the ones that have even like 3 people in there, if they park in their garages or on their driveway, albeit that they are steep, like mine, some of them are on the east side of the road and they're steep driveways, they can still park in them. They just have to shovel them in the winter, you know, every time it snows, stuff like that. And you can back out. I mean, I've been doing it for 27 years, so.
Can you hear me? Now you can. My name is Mark Lamson. I live on Slate Canyon. And I had a couple of questions. First of all, I would point out that I'm not necessarily opposed to parking permits if that gives a family 2 extra parking places on the street. I tend to not park in my driveway. I have a permanent handicap sticker. I'm a disabled veteran. And it's hard on the steep driveway to get in and out of the car. I have to fall in and I fall out. So it's nice to be able to park on the street, but it's not nice to have to park 3 doors down because I can't park in front of my house or across the street from my house. I'm wondering, how do you handle enforcement? So currently, we have a lot of cars that are parked on the street. They're driving up and down. I've called because I have a neighbor that tends to park a car in front of our house and leave it there for a week or 2. So I'll wait 3 days and I'll call parking enforcement. And then they'll wait a couple of days and they'll come up and they'll chalk the car. And then it's 3 more days. And maybe the neighbors will notice the chalk on their tire and maybe they won't. They've gotten plenty of citations, but I wonder if there's a more effective way to enforce parking as far as there's a 3-day limit regardless, right? You cannot leave a car unmoved for longer than 3 days. And in addition, how do we handle identifying where the cars are coming from? Because there's a lot of times they're out of state license plates. They may be unregistered. And if you're, and I guess in Utah, if your car's not registered and you park it in your driveway, you're okay. But there's a lot of enforcement questions. I'm not quite sure if there's automated ways, expensive ways, and why do we need to pay for a permit versus just issuing 2 permits per domicile or whatever?
I'm Chris Brown and I live on Slate Canyon Drive. And I think I've got 3 things just very quickly. I think I do pull out, we do park in the garage, and when I do pull out, usually on both sides of the house, we've got two cars parking in front of my house and in front of the neighbor's house. And they're both kind of intruding into my driveway. And so I have to kind of maneuver around those cars. And then also, it's kind of a pain in the butt. But then I also have sometimes, not to call any, but sometimes I have trash cans that are in the way as well that have been there for a very long time. And so I'm kind of trying to maneuver around those and see around those as well. And I think that, I mean, if the trash cans were gone, if we had 1 car per front, I don't know if that's even an option if we just had 1 car. But the speed is also definitely scary because I've pulled out and I thought no one was behind me, and all of a sudden someone's right on top of me blowing their horn at me, and I'm like, I'm just pulled out. And it's quick. It's really quick how fast that they can come up on you. And so 1 car in front of the house, if that's an option, because the 2 cars, it does intrude into my driveway, and I can't see with the trash cans, and then the speed is also a big thing as well.
Thank you. Here, can you pass that mic behind you? Oh, wait.
Hi, my name is Ben Tyre. I live on Slate Canyon Drive. I've been there for the last 12 years. My concern, again, like many have voiced, is speeding for safety. I think that's the biggest concern I have with backing out of my driveway, is if somebody is doing quite a bit over the speed limit, if they're going to hit me there. If somebody is just coming the speed limit, I really don't worry about backing out of my driveway. Question, correct me if I'm wrong, but when they did those surveys, that parking survey and whatnot, I believe that they said that that didn't warrant a parking permit program at that time, and that the street was safer because there are cars parked on it. Correct me if I'm wrong. Is that?
Yeah, so the staff report, this is the staff report from 2020, and so it's linked up in Open City Hall, so you can go and find that there. But in that staff report from then, they did find that, well, the traffic engineer said, like someone has already said before, cars being parked on the street does act as thank you, a deterrent of people speeding because the road is narrower. They also found there that as far as utilization of the street, it was not at a high enough number that they felt they needed to regulate. I will say with that, the area that they studied was all of Slate Canyon Drive, so including the parts that are as like the hills. So, but that's why they're redoing the study. And they're redoing it with like, well, in this area, like it's a lot, it'll be very detailed and the council look at that. And so,
Okay.
but
And
yes,
then,
that is correct from
okay.
the 2020 study.
Okay. And then lastly, I have a concern about a permit program, especially overnight parking. I have a lot of family and friends that come over and hang out. I guess for me, what I would hope is that we don't just do a broad sweep program for some bad actors. I know people that do have rentals and they're great neighbors. They don't have cars, they don't have problems. And so I think it is important that we're not pitting families against renters because there are good people that do rent out there. So I think that's important.
Thank you. Okay, now Dave.
Yeah, Dave Connect. I've been around as long as Melanie. And starting in 1994, I was the neighborhood chair, and I was the neighborhood chair off and on for 13 years. So I know this, the street, the neighborhood. About a year after all the homes were built on Slate Canyon Drive, someone in the neighborhood came to me. This is way back in like 95 or 6. And they gave me a list of 17 or 18 homes that had put in illegal basement apartments. Now, what's important to understand about your particular street, it's R2 PD, and whether you call it a planned development or a performance development, if you look up the PD ordinance, the developer negotiated with the city to get higher density for the homes than a regular R2 neighborhood. Closer together, more homes, and so you read the PD ordinance, and when you negotiate that kind of higher density and get that approval, it says right in the ordinance that you will not increase the density in the future for any reason, whether it's accessory apartments. So as the neighborhood chair, I turned in the list to the Rita Trimble, who was over zoning enforcement. And Rita said, well, Dave, do you have personal knowledge of any of these people? Because we usually have to go to court and you're going to have to testify. So can you testify that all these people are living here and over occupying in these illegal basement apartments? And I said, no. So they did nothing because it's really hard to prove these things. Then, I don't know, 6 months, a year later, I heard one of the city staff talking that, you know, because it's a PD street, and I think the person lived on the street, so they knew, you really can't even have, by law, a second kitchen. So I went back to Rita and I said, okay, so you don't want to enforce because you don't have the manpower to figure out who's who, but if they're not supposed to have a second kitchen, can you enforce on that? And she says, well, yeah, we can, and they did. And there was some enforcement. Then you fast forward to like a couple of years ago when the state legislature decided that everyone in the state of Utah should have potentially an accessory apartment. They did make exceptions for Provo. Instead of 90%, it's like only 30% of the city has to. But in order to find places where you could allow accessory apartments, this city council allowed them on your street, despite the fact that the zoning was really saying it can't happen. It did happen. So you will find that there are some legal accessory apartments on your street. And so the density has gone up, and with density, more people, you have more cars. You have the smallest lots of any neighborhood in the city, 4,000 square foot lots with virtually no street frontage. You're lucky to get a big truck or 2 really small cars parked in front. So you're at a disadvantage. And the speeding, that is a real problem. And it will continue to be a problem no matter what is done, whether you have permit parking or not. And so you probably just need more enforcement, because there's streets in Provo where I've been trained over the years that on like 820 North, you don't want to go over 25 because you never know when the cop's going to be there. But there's not enough cops on Slate Canyon to put the fear into anybody, apparently.
So there was, this goes off to the side a little bit, but also I've just had conversations with people over the years, Shannon Kynard, Slate Canyon Drive. But anyway, I've had different people come up and talk about parking. And a lot of times it has been a sense of territoriality and ownership of the asphalt in front of their house. So, we can talk about, codes, and that's all fine and that's totally fair. But I've also had direct conversations with people just going off on neighbor, like what they live across the street, but they do a U-turn and park in front of my house. And I'm like, why do you care? Like, isn't there something more important in your life to think about than that? That's how I think. But these people, and again, this is multiple, is so what they do is they want to claim their stake. And they're either going to use cones, they're going to attempt to use trash cans, basketball hoops, cars, have people in their family. Make sure you park out front, not in the driveway, because we've got to reserve our territory. And yet you'll hear them talk about the parking so bad, we got to do something to help the parking, but you can't create more of a parking problem by reserving your spots and say that you want to help parking and do those at the same time. And so I just see that happen. Also, these tales of hypothetical emotional tales of, if my aunt or my brother-in-law comes over, he has to park across the street and sometimes even 4 houses down, and that's like the worst thing in the world. I'm like, well, how many times has this happened? Well, he comes and visits me 4 times a year. Well, how many times do we run into a parking problem? Well, once. So we're going to change the whole system for 1 time a year for this one person. But that same person is completely comfortable going to Costco and walking for about 1.5 miles, which is the average Costco visit. And so what we have then now is a perception problem where they're like, but I have to have those spots because I need to just be able to go right to my house. But it's like, you were at Walmart, you had to go get milk, minimum distance to get milk, because all grocery stores put milk in the back, is going to be at least 1,000 feet, more, about 2/3 of a mile. Didn't complain about that, but heaven forbid you had to cross the street or walk more than 3 houses down, into your house. Like, what happens there? But anyway, that was just for that, because I have had conversations directly with people who bring those kinds of things up more than code.
We're gonna go right here. I think you're next. And then
Yeah, Dana Thompson on Slate Canyon again. Okay, I guess I'm just too quiet. So Dana Thompson on Slate Canyon. I think the permit issue would solve a lot of things. It is pretty even-handed approach. I know I would appreciate that, and for people that have been here since, I don't know, the 90s, there's easy ways to grandfather people in on that, and that would be, I feel, a fair way to handle renters as well as families. So I just wanted to echo that. And if we were really cared about safety and speed, I mean, we could build features, like Center Street to narrow the road occasionally, especially where there are fire hydrants, to encourage people to slow down. Human nature and driving.
Is this on? Okay, so I just want to ask, if we were to do the permit parking, right, would that probably, like, is it a higher possibility of that going hand in hand with overnight parking? Or is the overnight parking something they're really thinking about? Because I feel like if there's no parking at night, those cars aren't going to just disappear. They're just going to move to another part of the neighborhood, which isn't Slate Canyon Street. They're just going to go below. And then you're going to have an issue in that neighborhood. I just feel like it isn't resortful to put no solution. It'd be different if you were saying, well, we'd like to possibly put a parking lot way below going uphill to Slate Canyon, but that's not even in the conversation. So where would any result come from that?
I'll say the council isn't settled or swayed on either idea yet. So, and we're collecting new ideas. So if you have new ideas, we're also collecting those. Yeah, the permit is to park overnight or complete ban overnight. Those are the two ones that have been discussed at least briefly. Well, I'm gonna give it to Christine real quick and then I think here and then in the back.
I love that you're getting creative about ways to narrow the road because when in 2020 they did this study, you may remember about the roundabout and the bulb outs and things to change the traffic flow. And the consensus from the neighborhood, granted it was COVID, so it was an online virtual meeting, but the city had done a lot of prep work on trying to install traffic calming devices according to the engineering code for that road. And we failed to support that. And we gave the city the impression that we did not think there was a speed problem. So while we have all these creative people in the room and we're thinking about parking and narrowing the road, help me reflect on what it might look like to have diagonal parking curbside that effectively narrows both sides of the road, but allows a greater number of vehicles per frontage. Is that a possibility that residents would agree with, or would that only further make it harder to get out of driveways because now you have the length of a car instead of the width of a car?
Okay. I'm living in Slate Canyon and I'm agree with that guy because it's obviously we walk a lot to go shopping. And then I don't see the people here is bringing solution. And I'm agree with her too. If we're gonna bring solution, let's go do like a box with any ideas that we can fix. The speed thing is a problem for the kids. I'm 100% because sometimes I need to stop and help kids to pass and stop my car and tell the people to stop so I can help the little kids to go to their houses. That's just one thing. The second one, I'm agree with the people that been 30 years in here in these houses, but I think those contractors didn't plan the big houses they are because they have a lot of room. So obviously they're gonna leave a lot of people in there. Like I said before, a normal family here in Utah, they have minimum 5 kids, so you need to be realistic also. And I don't feel agree we need to pay to the city for parking in front of our houses, making money from us because we pay taxes from the front of the house and we don't gonna have solution. So if we're gonna increase any payment or something, the city they can do, will be nice to have a parking lot. So all those extra people, they want to park, they can have a free parking or at least park some in that parking lot. That will be agreed because if I'm gonna have a party in my house, my 50 years old, it was like a week ago, I can invite my 6th brother because it will be 6 more cars. So it's not realistic for the city have this type of discussion when they want to put rules in our street when we can be allowed to make our own rules. And I have another thing to say. I heard neighbors, they say, if we can make the 3rd driveway, will help some solution, but you cut one parking for the other people that can park in the street. That's one. So maybe paint the street and then have some line that we can be a little bit considered for the people they're gonna drive out or parking out. Some part I'm agree, but some other they can fit too.
Their bumper ends up being on their driveway. And so then it's hard for them to get out. Does that, yeah. So does that make sense? So by adding a third driveway on the houses that are our size, then you can still have street parking and you can provide an extra parking to alleviate people parking on the street.
With the
Yeah.
third driveway,
With
right?
a third driveway. Yeah,
I'm agree. Bet.
I am not sure, but I can look it up. Yes, it is. Hold on.
So if I have a party and I have a bunch of family come, because I don't have any friends yet, and they can come and they can enjoy parking and being at the house until what time? Say 11 o'clock? Okay, so 1 to 6, you know, if that car's got to be out of the street by 1 a.m., that's not so bad for a party. I'm old. I don't want to be up much past 1 a.m. hosting, but I could handle that. It's by doing it, restricting overnight parking versus restricting all parking. I think that's a better solution than going all out and saying no. Yeah.
Sorry, we're gonna talk with mics, but also there's a question back there that's been waiting. So
Just wanna say the last
yeah,
thing.
no, you finish. You were talking, but then we're gonna go
Paying
back
for
there.
that parking and feel like communists, my opinion, because it's like I'm not allowed to invite any people to my house because I need to let them use the street because they pay for that parking. So or overnight. So because if you have people coming like the people they said they visit 2-3 times a year and you have that parking, how you do? Because I have my birthday and I need to make everyone parking on the hill, going to all north to the Slate Canyon and go with my car and my husband to pick it up all the people and then drop it there and pick it up because that's the only way. So think about this, Council. And be realistic. We are in Utah. Anyone have 5 kids in their house. And I'm agree with that guy. You let them grow, you let them go out. They need to go work. They need to do everything like a normal people. So think about this society.
My name is Rick Anderson. I don't live on Slate Canyon, but I'm very familiar with it. Very familiar with Nevada Avenue, which a lot of the parking gets pushed down there. I know we're talking about suggestions. I agree there's all 3 of those problems with parking and speeding, but I think probably the first thing that I would recommend to the council is to just enforce the occupancy thing. Do that first, and then if the parking doesn't improve, then we look at maybe the permits. But I think we'd be surprised that if the occupancy is enforced, you'd find an improvement. I think we ought to do that first. So that would be my suggestion to the council.
My name's Ken Bradshaw. I'm on Slate Canyon Drive as well. I'm also thinking with like permit parking overnight or just like an overnight parking ban. Like say if we're putting the limit at 1 a.m., like how many of us are actually backing out of our driveways at 1 a.m., right? Like I don't see how this is really helping safety when we're talking about night parking. Cause yeah, I hardly ever leave the house like that late at night, right? And I don't see very many people driving on the street that late at night either, right? I think the problem is like during the day, the speeds is the big problem. I just don't see backing out of driveways at 1 a.m. as a problem at all.
Again, my name is Jeff Whitlock. Don't live on Slate Canyon Avenue, but I live just up Oregon, which is Nevada. So first, really great to see so many neighbors out. Really cool to engage on this tough issue. More people show up to this than our planning commission meetings, so it's clearly a big issue. Because I don't live on Slate Canyon, I don't necessarily have a dog in the fight, but just my 2 cents is I feel like the first priority should be to address the speeding through additional signs, enforcement, maybe traffic calming measures, then address over occupancy through rental enforcement. Perhaps you require all landlords to renew their rental agreements, and upon that time have them sign an affidavit of residency or something like that to get a renewal of a renter's permit. And then you can address parking. I feel like I just hearing a lot of people, there are legitimate, again, I know they don't have a right to the street in their city code, but feels like perhaps if we address those other 2 problems, the problem might take care of itself, and then you can deal with parking enforcement, which there sounds like could cause problems for people's lives and also not solve the problem. Because I agree with the point that was said earlier is, and just to make it that you're going to create overflow in the other streets. If you're just enforcing on that one street, there's a lot of side streets that people can go park on. They're going to come up Nevada. I saw this very recently, just as not a perfect analog, but case in point, when they started enforcing this lot right by Smith's, when PEG started enforcing that lot, there used to be cars spattered in there, and people didn't stop driving to where they needed to drive. They just parked all over the street, all around there. It's like, so people are going to just park a little bit farther and walk a little bit farther. They're probably not going to move. So I think that's why you're going to solve the problem a little bit more directly by addressing the root cause of the problem. One last thing that I just want to say while we're taking notes, as another safety concern that I have on that road is it has become an access point to off-roaders on the foothills. And if you notice, if you just kind of go on the south part of the street, there's an area where people will regularly go across the sidewalk, which kids will walk on and go to like drive back behind to the ovens back there. And then they're driving behind our houses and oftentimes going very, very, very fast late at night. We're on Bonneville Shoreline Trail, where, you know, it's a pedestrian trail. And so that makes me worried. And in the summer, it could be a fire hazard. So anyway, I just wanted to point out that like we should block off that entry and exit point with a cement barricade or something, because people will regularly just turn a left and then go into the foothills right off of Slate Canyon Drive.
Okay, just real quick, love the discussion. We do have to end at 8:15, which is I can't read that. Wow. 6 minutes. So in 6 minutes, we're going to wrap it up. So just keep that in mind. And we're going to go here.
So I find it reasonable that we could actually just make sections of the street, and each section focuses on the main concern of the people living in the area. Since obviously, as you were speaking, their driveway would be the best solution or possible solution for you, but I know near my house that wouldn't be the best solution for us. So obviously, I feel like it should just be something that's associated by groups, if anything, because everyone has different needs, but the people that are near you are obviously going to talk about those needs a lot more than the people 6 houses down.
Again, what happens if you don't get parking regulation? I think you need to answer that question, because the city is legally required to enforce the laws, and they've already been called on. It's been called on. Like I told you, it's already been called on. So if you don't get, what happens if you don't get parking regulation? They are going to enforce zoning on every single property that owns more than 4 cars. You're breaking the law, even if you're a family. If you are a family, you will have a zoning officer knock on your door and tell you that you need to sell some of your vehicles. It's equal. Everybody has equal right and it's equal responsibility. The parking regulation gives you, those people of you who have 5 or 6 cars, is going to save you in the end, because you'll at least have some parking on your street. You know, it gives you a little bit of buffer. You can park one in front of your house and then you can, park the ones in your car. But if you don't, because this has come up in other meetings before, when we were talking about the condos up above, the young single adults, you can't enforce on us, just because we're single or we're students, because we have more cars, when there are families down there with more than 4 cars. That is brought up all the time. And that is going to be brought up. Any family, it has to be equal. Any family that owns more than 4 cars will be enforced on. And so I'm just throwing that out, that you can't do that because you don't own the road. That house said 4 cars. That affects all of Provo City, the traffic flow and everything. When you start bringing in more cars than your house is allotted, you affect the air quality and the traffic flow of everybody, which is why it's illegal. So I'm just throwing that out, that I worry that everyone thinks if there's not parking regulation, that it's going to go back to the status quo, which is no zoning enforcement. And I think that if you knew the battles that are going around behind the scenes, it's not going to go back to the status quo. It is going to be heavy zoning enforcement and it has to be fair. A renter with a bunch of students with 5 cars is the same as a family with 5 cars. And so you're kind of stuck in that situation. And it has been going on for 5 years. The city has said over and over again that the most cost-effective way and the most peaceable way is to handle this illegal, with people illegally bringing in more cars to their property, is to handle parking regulation, because it gives you a little bit of a buffer. And it is the most peaceable way. So I'm just throwing that out, that if you do not assume that it's going to go back to the way it was before. You also have to be fair. It's not going to be 2 cars per house. It will probably be 1, because you're going to have to fight with the Pleasant View neighborhood and the Wasatch neighborhood and the Foothills neighborhood, who fought this battle, and they were not allowed to bring in more driveways, because they were not allowed to put driveways, and they were not allowed to get extra cars than what they had footage for. So it's a precedent that, a legal battle that you're going to fight with the whole community on why this neighborhood now gets privileges that other neighborhoods have been denied.
So I just didn't want to make sure that you mentioned the diagonal parking and having the homeowners have the permit to the diagonal parking, so other neighborhoods don't park in our diagonal parking. And if you do diagonal parking staggered, like some diagonal parking over here and then so diagonal parking later on in the street and so on, you create the road start being this way. Now it's kind of hard for cars to start speeding if the road is curving this way. So automatically it makes it narrower. It makes it so cars can't speed so fast because they have to be swerving. And then people that have 5 drivers in their home can still have parking in front of their homes. And if you have a party, you can have people park in front of your house. And if people are slowing down on the street when you're backing out of your driveway, then it's not so dangerous to back out. So I was just thinking that kind of covers everything. Yeah, we can't. Yeah, and there's no speed bump because it's an IRA.
Okay, I don't know if it's reasonable. I'm Lorraine Wallace. I live on North Slate Canyon. When I bought my house 20 years ago, there was no parking problem. I believe the biggest problem with the Aspen building is over occupancy. There are no empty spots across from my house, ever at night. And there's no houses there. There are houses, but their fronts are not facing Slate Canyon. So I notice when I do some walking that they have maybe 4 or 5 spots on each street up in the Aspen area. But there are probably 20 units on that street. So those 4 or 5 extra spots. I don't know if it would be reasonable at all, but could the city build a parking lot, maybe at the top of Slate Canyon Hill, for families that do have? I mean, I have 7 children. They don't live with me anymore, but we had a lot of cars. So if my children had to park farther away from my house, something like that, there was a place, because I don't know where these cars are even going to go. The over occupancy across the street doesn't bother me except for the traffic, the parking. And so, but as far as the permits, if it's only overnight, I would hope that it would be transferable so that I could maybe have 2 members of my family stay overnight. I have a 5-bedroom home. I have room for my whole family. But if they don't have a place to park, that's a problem. So maybe provide a parking lot at the top of the hill and at the bottom of the hill where extra cars could be parked.
Okay, I'm gonna take one comment here, and then if we have one more last call, one more comment besides here. All right, so last comment.
Is that me? Several years ago, they released a survey for the council members, and they said, here are some of the things that we can do to get better enforcement of over occupancy. And the council passed laws. They passed a rental dwelling license so that anybody that is renting out their condo or their townhome has to have a rental dwelling license. Well, you've got people up there who don't have one. They ought to be enforced on immediately. They passed the zoning disclosure rule so that anytime a realtor sells a place, the homeowner is supposed to be notified immediately. Well, there are realtors who don't even get that until after the home is already been shown and offers accepted on it, and then they hand it to you as a document that comes in your closing packet. There are so many little things that the council could do to improve occupancy. They could fund some better zoning enforcement officers. But when it came down to what the council was ready to do and willing to do, I agree with you. I agree with you. I think that the city always goes back to parking enforcement because it's a trigger. It's a trigger to get everything else. When was the last time, this is the question I want to know, when was the last time the zoning enforcement sent out a letter to all of the homeowners?
I don't work in zoning.
Well, I
I'm
want
not
that
sure.
I want that to be done on a regular basis, and then those that don't respond, I want a follow-up. I want them to fund a $50,000 zoning enforcement officer that's going to do nothing but contact those out-of-town landlords that says, if you haven't got a rental dwelling license, you're in violation. And if you don't have enough parking spaces, you're in violation. And if your property management company is renting to more than 3 people, they're in violation, and we want to report on them because we're going to prosecute them. That's what I want.
Okay, thank you guys for coming. Like I said at the beginning, this is on Open City Hall, so this document, and then you can make comments. There's already a number of people that have made statements on there, and you can read everyone else's. There's actually a cool feature where you can say, like, I support the statement that someone's already said, so that's cool. But you can go on there and make a statement. Again, you can also email the council@provo.org. And then just to notify you, this discussion is coming to the council work meeting on April 30th. And the work meeting's a little different than the regular night meeting. The work meeting, the council just discusses, and there's no time for public comment, but there's also no action taken by the council, formal action, but they will be discussing it at that meeting. So if you want to listen in on that, and if you want to give feedback to the council prior to that, I would suggest doing that. That's a great way to kind of get them to ask questions of staff that are there at those meetings. That's a really good way to kind of interact with the council. So next time the council will be discussing this is April 30th, which is a Tuesday. But again, Open City Hall is a really good way to put comments on, and then also your neighborhood Facebook pages. Rachel is amazing and watches those and send those comments and make sure she's responding and sending those to the council. So make sure you do that. Open City Hall. And our neighborhood district meeting. Our neighborhood district meeting is, I actually think it's on May 1st. Or it is my neighborhood. So it'll be after the April 30th meeting, but that's also, but before any decision is made, so we can discuss there. Of course, go for it.
I've got a Facebook group called Our Provo where I post just local stuff. I watch the city council meetings, then I post about them. Come and join it if you'd like to. Let's have a discussion about what we're going to do to improve zoning enforcement. Thanks.
And then I think Candace had something as well.
I just a quick question about like, is there going to be a decision made by the city council, or is we just having more meetings and more get together? Because we've lived here 27 years now, and we've talked about the same topic, but nothing really gets done. So just wondered if there's going to be change or not.
I am not the council, so they are the ones that make the decision, but we are discussing again on April 30th. So that is just a discussion, a work meeting. From there, in work meetings, they'll usually make motions for formal action for code amendments or for budgetary changes to try and then address the problem. So that is where they'll motion to make action at that point. But that would be great feedback for the council as well. So emailing them or open city hall, that would be great to reach out to them with that thought. Okay, I think that's it. So thank you everyone so much for coming. I thought this went really well. So thanks everyone. They don't